He thought she was invisible, just another waitress wiping up his mess. But when the most feared capo in New York whispered a brutal insult in a dying Sicilian dialect, he made a fatal mistake. He assumed she couldn't understand. He was wrong. And her response didn't just shock him, it started a war. The rain on 52nd Street didn't wash away the grime of New York City. It just made the neon lights of the theater district reflect off the black asphalt like spilled oil. Inside La Casa d'Oro, the air was thick with the scent of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and fear. Sienna Russo wiped her hands on her apron, her knuckles raw from the harsh, sanitizing soap. It was 9:30 p.m. Her feet throbbed in her cheap black flats, but she kept her spine straight. She had to. In a place like this, weakness was like blood in the water. Table 4 needs a refill on the Barolo, and stop dreaming, Sienna, Mr. Giamatti snapped, snapping his fingers in front of her face. He was a short, sweating man who treated his staff like cattle, but he paid in cash, under the table. For a girl trying to stay off the grid, cash was oxygen. "Yes, sir," Sienna said, her voice low. She pushed a stray lock of dark, curly hair behind her ear and grabbed the heavy crystal decanter. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly. It wasn't a sound, it was a drop in pressure. The ambient chatter died down. The clinking of silverware stopped. The front door opened and 3 men walked in. The first 2 were large, built like vending machines in suits. But the third man, he sucked the air out of the room. He was tall, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Sienna's entire life savings. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of cold espresso, dark, bitter, and alert. Lorenzo Enzo Moretti. Sienna froze near the service station. She knew the face. Everyone in the boroughs knew the face, even if they pretended they didn't. At 32, he was the youngest Don the Moretti crime family had ever seen. He was rumored to have taken over the city's concrete unions by breaking the kneecaps of the previous union head personally. "Give them the back corner," Mr. Giamatti hissed, his face draining of color. "Sienna, you take the table." "Me?" Panic flared in her chest. "Mr. Giamatti, please, put Marco on it. He's better with the—" "Marco is on break. You take it. Don't look him in the eye, pour from the right, and for the love of God, don't speak unless spoken to." Sienna swallowed the lump in her throat. She grabbed the menus and walked toward the corner booth. The bodyguards, hulking men named Rocco and Sal, took a table 10 feet away, scanning the room like predatory birds. Enzo sat alone in the booth, his back against the velvet upholstery, one hand resting on the table, tapping a rhythm on the white tablecloth. "Good evening," Sienna said, forcing her voice to remain steady. She placed the menus down. "Water for the table?" Enzo didn't look up. He was scrolling through something on his phone. "Sparkling. And bring the 98 Brunello, the one Giamatti keeps in the cellar for the mayor." His voice was deep, textured like gravel. "Right away, sir." The next 20 minutes were a lesson in invisibility. Sienna moved like a ghost. She uncorked the vintage wine, poured it without spilling a drop, and placed the bread basket silently. Enzo ignored her completely. He was on a call, speaking in rapid-fire Italian, discussing shipments at the Jersey docks. Sienna tried to tune it out. Knowing too much got you killed. But then, disaster struck. As Sienna reached over to clear a bread plate, a busboy rushing past bumped her elbow. The movement was slight, but it was enough. The red sauce from the plate sloshed over the rim, splashing onto the cuff of Enzo's pristine charcoal suit jacket. The restaurant went dead silent. Sienna gasped, grabbing a napkin immediately. "Oh my God, sir, I am so sorry. Let me get club soda. It will get the stain out." Enzo stood up slowly. He looked at the red stain on his cuff, then looked at Sienna. His expression wasn't angry, it was bored, which was infinitely worse. "Get away from me," he said calmly. "I can fix it, please, Enzo turned his head toward his bodyguard, Rocco, who was already half standing. Enzo waved him down. Then he looked at Sienna with a sneer that could cut glass. He leaned in slightly, assuming she was just another clueless American girl who barely spoke English, let alone the dialect of the old country. He spoke in Sicilian, specifically the dialect of Palermo's old quarters. It was a rough, guttural language, almost extinct in New York. "Tagliala. Trema come una cagna bastarda. È inutile. Forse a matria vinniu pei un chilo di pane." Look at her, shaking like a mongrel bitch. She's useless. Her mother probably sold her for a kilo of bread. It was a devastating, cruel thing to say. It attacked her dignity, her fear, and her family in one breath. Enzo turned away, brushing his jacket, expecting confusion or a tearful apology in English. He didn't get that. Sienna went rigid. The fear evaporated, replaced by a white-hot flash of indignation that overrode her survival instinct. She had heard that dialect in her grandmother's kitchen. She heard it in her nightmares. She dropped the dirty napkin on the table. She looked him dead in the eye, her chin lifting. "A me matria na santa, signore," she replied, her voice dropping an octave, slipping perfectly into the thick, rolling cadence of a native Sicilian. "Eu non tremo pilomini comutia. Pulisciti a giacca tu sulo." My mother is a saint, sir, and I don't shake for men like you. Clean your own jacket. The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. Mr. Giamatti, who was rushing over to apologize, stopped dead in his tracks. Enzo froze. His hand, which was reaching for his wine glass, stopped in mid-air. The arrogance vanished from his face, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. He slowly turned his head back to her, his dark eyes narrowing, searching her face for the first time. He didn't see a waitress anymore. He saw an anomaly. "What did you say?" he whispered, in English this time, though he sounded breathless. Sienna realized what she had done. The adrenaline crashed. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had just insulted the head of the Moretti family, in his own private language. She stepped back, clutching her tray. "I have to check on table 5. She spun around and walked away. She didn't run, that would show guilt, but she walked fast, disappearing into the kitchen. Enzo Moretti stood there, the red stain on his cuff forgotten. He watched the swinging kitchen doors settle. "Rocco," Enzo said, his voice low and dangerous. The bodyguard was at his side instantly. "Boss? You want me to handle her?" Enzo stared at the door. "No, I want you to find out who the hell she is. Nobody speaks that dialect. Not here. Not anymore." He sat back down, a slow, terrifying smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Bring me her file, tonight." The kitchen of La Casa d'Oro was a chaotic sanctuary. Sienna braced herself against the stainless steel counter, breathing hard. The sous-chef, a kindly man named Leo, looked at her with concern. "Sienna, you look like you've seen a ghost. Did Giamatti yell at you?" "Worse," she whispered. "I need to go. I need to leave now." She couldn't finish the shift. She knew how these men operated. If you caught their attention, you became a toy. If you embarrassed them, you became a target. She had done both. She untied her apron with shaking hands and tossed it into the laundry bin. She grabbed her coat from the locker and slipped out the back alley exit into the pouring rain. She didn't wait for her tips. She didn't say goodbye to Giamatti. She ran. Sienna lived in a studio apartment in Astoria, Queens, a 40-minute subway ride away. The entire ride home, she sat with her back to the subway car wall, watching every person who got on or off. Every man in a suit made her flinch. Why did I open my mouth? She scolded herself. Why couldn't I just be the dumb waitress? But she knew why. Because the accent he used wasn't just Sicilian. It was Palermitano, specifically from the Calçar district. It was the same accent her father used to use before he disappeared when she was 12. It triggered a defensive reflex she thought she had buried years ago. By the time she reached her apartment building, a crumbling brick walk-up, it was nearly 1 a.m. She fumbled with her keys, her hands wet and slippery. She pushed the door open and locked it behind her, engaging all 3 deadbolts. She leaned her forehead against the painted wood, exhaling a long, shaky breath. "You're safe," she whispered to herself. "He's a billionaire mobster. He has better things to do than chase a waitress who snapped at him." She turned around to toss her keys on the table. She screamed. Sitting in her oversized armchair, illuminated only by the street lamp glowing through the window, was Enzo Moretti. He was casual, one leg crossed over the other, the jacket with the wine stain gone, replaced by crisp white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He held a glass of her cheap supermarket wine in his hand, looking at it with mild amusement. "You have terrible taste in wine, Sienna," he said softly. Sienna backed up until her spine hit the door. How did you get in here?" "I own the building," Enzo lied effortlessly. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. With men like him, they owned whatever they touched. And you're hard to find, Sienna Russo. Or should I say, Sienna Vanzetti? The blood drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." Enzo stood up. He filled the small room with his presence. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked fascinated. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. "Russo is a common name. Vanzetti, not so much. Especially not when connected to a certain informant who vanished from Palermo 15 years ago." He stopped 2 feet in front of her. He smelled of rain and expensive tobacco. "Who are you?" "I'm nobody," she said, her voice trembling, but her chin held high. "I'm a waitress you insulted. You broke into my home. Get out before I call the police." Enzo laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "The police? Sweetheart, I pay the police pension fund. They won't come for you." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. She flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, his fingers lightly brushed a wet curl of hair away from her cheek. His touch was electric, terrifyingly gentle. "You speak the dialect of the Calça," he murmured, his eyes searching hers. "My grandmother spoke that way. My father spoke that way. Nobody under the age of 50 speaks that way unless they were raised in the shadows of the old feuds." "I learned it from movies," she lied. Liar. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You understood what I called you, and you had the fire to correct me. I haven't been spoken to like that in 10 years. Maybe you need to be spoken to like that more often," she shot back, unable to help herself. Enzo's eyes widened slightly, and then the corner of his mouth quirked up. Perhaps. Suddenly his demeanor hardened. He stepped back, the amusement gone. "You have a problem, Sienna. You see, when I looked into you tonight, I found nothing. No credit history before 3 years ago. No high school records. Just a ghost living in my city. And then I made a call to Italy." Sienna felt her knees go weak. "Don't. There are people looking for a girl with your description. People from the Calabresi families. Rivals of mine." Enzo tilted his head. "If I hand you over to them, it would bridge a very expensive gap in my business relations." Sienna felt tears prick her eyes. "Please, I just want to live. I'm not part of that life. Not anymore." Enzo studied her. He saw the genuine terror, but also the steel underneath. He saw a woman who had survived on her own, hiding in plain sight. "I won't hand you over," Enzo said, shocking her. You won't?" "No." He walked to the door, unlocking the deadbolts she had just fastened. "Because you owe me." "I owe you?" she asked, incredulous. "For what?" "For the jacket," he said, deadpan. "And for the insult. You humiliated a don in front of his men. In my world, blood is usually the price for that." He opened the door, letting the hallway light flood in. "But I have a different payment in mind." He turned back to her, his silhouette framed in the doorway. "Get some sleep, Sienna. Tomorrow, you don't work at La Casa d'Oro. Tomorrow, you work for me." "I'm not being your mistress," she spat out. Enzo chuckled, a genuine sound this time. "I don't need to hire women to warm my bed, Tesoro. I need a translator. Someone I can trust to speak the old dialects during a meeting with the Sicilian delegation next week. Someone who isn't a federal agent. Someone with fire." And if I say no, Enzo's eyes went cold again. "Then I forget I ever saw you. And I let the Calabresi family know that the lost Vanzetti daughter is serving pasta in Queens." He stepped out into the hallway. "Be ready at 8 a.m. Rocco will pick you up. Don't make him wait." The door clicked shut. Sienna slid down the wall until she hit the floor, burying her face in her hands. She had escaped the mafia life for 10 years. But in one night, one slip of the tongue had dragged her right back into the belly of the beast. And the worst part was, as she remembered the way Enzo Moretti had looked at her, she wasn't sure if she was more afraid of him killing her, or of the strange, magnetic pull she felt when he was near. The dress Enzo had sent to her apartment was not an outfit. It was armor disguised as silk. It was emerald green, floor-length, with a slit that ran dangerously high up her thigh, and a back that plunged low enough to make a priest blush. It fit Sienna like a second skin. By 8 p.m., she was walking into the Vault, an exclusive underground cigar lounge in Lower Manhattan that required a retinal scan to enter. Enzo walked beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. To the world, she was his arm candy. To Enzo, she was his radar. "Remember," Enzo whispered, his breath hot against her ear as the heavy oak doors opened. "Don Salvo and his men are from the old country. They think I'm an Americanized businessman who has forgotten the old ways. They will smile in English and plot my murder in the dialect of Corleone. You listen, you translate, you signal me if the wind changes." Sienna nodded, her heart thumping against her ribs. "And if they catch me listening, then we both die," Enzo said simply. "So don't get caught." They sat at a circular mahogany table. The air was thick with blue smoke. Opposite them sat Don Salvo, a man who looked like a dehydrated tortoise in a suit, flanked by 2 younger men who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. The negotiation began. It was about shipping routes in the Mediterranean. On the surface, it was polite. Don Salvo spoke broken English, smiling with yellow teeth, praising Enzo's business acumen. "You have done well, Lorenzo," Salvo wheezed. "Your father would be proud. We accept the 20% cut." Enzo nodded, reaching for his scotch. "Generous. We have a deal." But then, Salvo turned to his nephew on his left. He picked up a cigar and spoke in a rapid, muddled dialect, a mix of Sicilian rural slang and old code words. To anyone else, it sounded like a casual comment about the tobacco quality. "U café è freddo, a mano dritta have u cutedu." The coffee is cold. The right hand holds the knife. The nephew nodded imperceptibly, and shifted his weight. His hand drifted inside his jacket. Sienna's blood ran cold. The right hand. She looked at the waiter approaching Enzo's right side to refill his water. The waiter's eyes were darting nervously. He wasn't looking at the glass. He was looking at Enzo's neck. Time seemed to slow down. The waiter reached into his vest, not for a pitcher, but for something metallic. Sienna didn't think. She didn't translate. She reacted. "Enzo, right side!" she screamed, shattering the hush of the room. In the same motion, she grabbed the heavy crystal ashtray from the table and hurled it at the waiter's face. It connected with a sickening crunch. The waiter staggered back, dropping a garrote wire that had been coiled in his palm. Chaos erupted. Enzo was out of his chair instantly, kicking the table over to create a barricade. "Get down!" he roared, shoving Sienna behind the heavy mahogany slab. Gunfire exploded in the small room. The deafening cracks of pistols bounced off the walls. Enzo drew his own weapon, a sleek, silver automatic, and fired 2 precise shots over the table. Don Salvo's nephew crumpled. "They set us up!" Enzo yelled over the noise. "Rocco, back door!" Rocco and the security team burst in, engaging Salvo's men. The room filled with smoke and shouting. Sienna was curled in a ball on the floor, glass shards cutting into her palms. She felt a strong hand grab her arm. "Move!" Enzo commanded. He dragged her through the kitchen, firing backward to keep heads down. They burst out into the alleyway, where a black SUV was screeching to a halt. They dove inside, the tires smoking before the doors were even closed. "Go, drive!" Enzo barked at the driver. As the car sped away, weaving through traffic, Enzo turned to Sienna. He was breathing hard, his tie undone, a streak of blood, not his own, on his cheek. He looked wild, terrifying. He grabbed her face with both hands, forcing her to look at him. "You speak the dialect of Corleone, too?" he demanded, his eyes wide. "My grandmother," Sienna gasped, trembling from the adrenaline dump. She was from the village next to theirs. "The coffee is cold," means the deal is dead. The right hand was the assassin. Enzo stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled her crashing into his chest, burying his face in her hair. He held her so tight it hurt. "You saved my life," he rasped against her neck. "A waitress from Queens just saved the capo of New York." "I told you," she whispered into his shirt, gripping his lapels. "I'm not just a waitress." Enzo pulled back, his eyes burning with an intensity that made the earlier gunfight seem tame. "No, you're not. And that's the problem, Sienna. Salvo saw you. He knows you understood. The secret is out. You're in the war now." 3 days later, the war was over before the newspapers even knew it had begun. Enzo Moretti didn't just strike back, he scorched the earth. Utilizing the information Sienna had translated from the wiretaps they had recovered, slang terms and locations no FBI agent could pass, Enzo systematically dismantled Don Salvo's operations. He hit their warehouses, their accounts, and their safe houses. Sienna had been moved to Enzo's penthouse overlooking Central Park. It was a fortress of glass and steel. She wandered the rooms like a prisoner, though the door was unlocked. She was waiting for the fallout, waiting for him to toss her aside now that she was useful. On the 4th night, Enzo returned. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, but his stride was steady. He walked into the living room, where Sienna was staring out at the city lights. He tossed a heavy manila envelope onto the coffee table. "What is this?" she asked. "Freedom," Enzo said. He walked to the bar and poured 2 drinks. Inside that envelope is a new identity, a passport, a bank account with $5 million, and a plane ticket to Geneva. The Vanzetti name is erased. The Calabresi family thinks you died in the crossfire at the club. I planted a story. Sienna looked at the envelope. It was everything she had wanted for 10 years. Safety, anonymity, a way out. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I served my purpose?" Enzo turned to her, glass in hand. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. "You did more than that. You gave me the city." "Then why are you sending me away?" "Because you were right," Enzo said, his voice tightening. "You're a civilian. You deserve a life where you don't have to decode death threats over dinner. You deserve peace." Sienna picked up the envelope. She felt the weight of it. She thought about the cheap apartment in Queens, the aching feet, the fear of being found. Then she looked at Enzo. She saw the loneliness behind the power. She saw the man who had shielded her body with his own when the bullets started flying. She realized she didn't want peace. She wanted him. Sienna walked over to the fireplace. She held the envelope over the flames. "What are you doing?" Enzo asked, stepping forward, his mask of calm cracking. "I don't speak French," Sienna said. She dropped the envelope into the fire. The paper curled and blackened, the passport to Geneva turning to ash. "And I hate Swiss chocolate." Enzo stopped a foot away from her. "Sienna, do you have any idea what you just did? I can't protect you if you stay. Not completely. You will be a target." "I was already a target," she said, stepping into his space. She reached up and fixed his collar, a gesture of familiarity that shocked them both. "I was hiding in the dark for a decade, Enzo. I'm tired of hiding. You didn't just find me. You woke me up." She looked up into his dark eyes. "I don't want to be a ghost anymore. I want to be yours." Enzo let out a ragged breath, as if he had been holding it since he walked in. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "This isn't a fairy tale, Tesoro," he warned, his voice low and rough. "There are no happy endings in this life. Only survival." "Then we survive together," she challenged him. "Besides, who else is going to translate when the Neapolitans come to town next month? I hear their dialect is impossible." Enzo smiled. It was a real smile, wide and breathtaking. He leaned down, his lips brushing hers. "You're dangerous, Sienna Russo." "Vanzetti," she corrected him, reclaiming her name for the first time in years. "My name is Sienna Vanzetti." "Not for long," Enzo murmured, before he kissed her. 6 months later, the staff at La Casa d'Oro froze as the front door opened. Mr. Giamatti, still sweating, rushed to the front. Enzo Moretti walked in, looking sharper than ever. But this time he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, her hand tucked firmly in the crook of his arm, was Sienna. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a tailored black dress and diamonds that caught the light like stars. She stopped at the host stand. Mr. Giamatti's jaw dropped. "Sienna," he stammered. She smiled, cool and untouchable. "It's Mrs. Moretti, Giamatti, and we'll take the corner booth. Try not to spill anything this time." As they walked to their table, the restaurant fell silent, not out of fear, but out of respect. The waitress was gone. The Queen had arrived. And when the busboy accidentally dropped a fork near their table, clattering loudly, Sienna didn't flinch. She just looked at Enzo, winked, and said in perfect loud Sicilian, "Ure è a tavola. Tutto è tranquillo. The king is at the table. All is calm." This story reminds us that power isn't just about muscle or money. Sometimes it's about the secrets we keep and the heritage we carry. Sienna went from wiping tables to ruling the underworld because she refused to be intimidated. And Enzo learned that the strongest partner isn't the one with a gun. but the one who understands the language of the enemy. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I post new twisted romance stories every week. What did you think of Sienna's transformation? Let me know in the comments below. Would you have taken the money and run, or burned the ticket like she did? Thanks for watching.